in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So I guess we'll start with our updates from our administrators. Dr. Harrison?
Good evening, everyone. A few things to share this evening. I don't know how many folks had the opportunity to enjoy the IHS Fall play, Clue. I certainly want to take a second to commend and thank the cast, crew, and our faculty leadership of the production. It was really impressive and an enjoyable night. It was just a lot of fun to see our kids up there with their talents coming out on the stage. It was just a super night, and it was just a lot of fun to watch them, and it was an enjoyable evening. Carol sat right next to me through it, and it was an event that was enjoyed by all. I want to thank community members that contributed to our dress code survey that was sent out just over a week ago. We received in total over 291 responses from parents, students, faculty, and staff. We're in the process of setting up a dress code review committee that's going to consider the feedback on the proposed dress code. The committee will be meeting in the coming weeks, and then we are preparing for a presentation of kind of a quasi-final product to the Board of Education on December 3rd. As many of you know, our fine Dr. Kaur will be retiring in January, and the district has undergone essentially two extensive search processes. Unfortunately, in the first search, we sought to hire a probationary or permanent employee. That effort did not result in a candidate that was the right match for the district at this time, so we initiated a search for an interim candidate. And I want to share with the public that that process is progressing well, and that I'm optimistic that in the coming month that we'll be making a recommendation to the Board of Education to appoint an interim assistant superintendent for instruction and human resources. I do want to draw the community's attention to a communication that was sent out yesterday by not only me, but our new Director of Technology, Jay Strumwasser. We sent out a communication that pertained to new education law 2D, which is in place to govern or regulate how personally identifiable information is collected and utilized in public entities, in particular schools. As a part of this law, each school is required to publish an inventory of software or applications that are utilized in the school district. In the communication that went out yesterday, we introduced a new interactive tool to the school community. This inventory is in part maintained by a collaboration of the BOCE's regional information centers. Statewide, all the regional information centers, or RICs, have come together to support one effort called RIC 1. Here they are actually organizing data privacy information and supporting this portal that enables districts to be able to have the interactive feature, not only to list the individual applications that are being used in schools, but it provides a direct link to the particular company's data privacy requirements and policies, so it begins to show how data is collected and how they utilize that data. And the portal also provides us with an opportunity to add supplemental information. So Mr. Strumwasser has taken an additional step and is reaching out to a lot of these vendors to have them actually sign off on our own local data privacy Bill of Rights. While that is covered in, those specifics are covered in the review that RIC 1 is doing, we just thought it was a nice, responsible added measure to gain that information where we can, and to put Irvington on the map of, in some cases, little small companies, or other cases, big companies, to know that we're watching you. And we also are linking it to other important or interesting information as it pertains to data privacy and security with the particular vendors. I do want to note that that is a tool that's always going to be evolving. As we look to introduce new software or applications in our district, they will be added to that inventory, and then as we cease to use some, they will come off that list. So it was sent out to community-wide, and it is posted with a link from the homepage under the news section and from our district technology page as well. At the next Board of Education meeting, Dr. Kaur will present our annual student performance report. As in past years, she'll highlight our students' performance on standardized tests, such as those administered by New York State as well as others, such as AP exams. However, we do want to note that due to the timing, we're not going to be able to provide all of the data in comparative formats as we have in past years, because the state has yet to release comps associated with Regent scores, and the state has not yet released the science scores. So we're waiting on that information, but we will be able to present how Irvington performed in those areas. So if the board desires at a later date, we can always come back and supplement the report with that information. Also, last year, the district began to enrich that report with a lot of examples of the work that was being led associated with data in the school district. This year, again, Dr. Kaur is collaborating with not only our administrative team, but our instructional leaders to get lots of examples of the evolution of our work with data across the schools. So where you'll see examples from elementary and high school about data-specific work that's being led by our administrators, department chairs, instructional leaders, so on and so forth. So I think you'll find that to be insightful, and will demonstrate another step forward on that front. And then finally, really for me, is thinking about Monday, district's close in observance of Veterans Day, simply as a reminder, but I do want to highlight that this year, in an effort to continue to provide the most secure spaces possible for our students, we hosted our Fall Superintendent's Conference Day today on Election Day. So with Dows Lane being a polling site, we did not have our students in school while voters were visiting the schools as well. So our staff was obviously involved in tremendous experiences throughout the day, and Dr. Kaur will share some of those highlights for you.
Sure. So at the elementary level, we focused on assessment and developing assessments that focus on measuring understanding. And that's a really, really hard thing. It's hard to measure thinking. So we started on a day of just some learning and introduction of, for some, and new for some, and some have started to experience the 6 facets of understanding. And it's just a framework for how to design your instruction and align your stage 2 assessments with stage 1. So that was we started in the morning with me presenting to the entire elementary, for all the elementary teachers, not special ed, all of our special educators, K through 12, with Gail Krieger and Iris Gallagher, working on designing instruction and supporting their development of how to support students in the classroom through the lens of special education. Sometimes our special educators don't always, we don't always offer them the experience in developing their specific skill set. And that's a miss for us. We need to do that. And so today was a chance for us to do that K through 12. Part of the reason, and it's just worth noting this, you know, we want our special education teachers to do everything. We want them to do all the trainings for co-teachers. We want anything general education teachers are in, we want a special education teacher to be in. But they really have a set of knowledge and skill that needs to be developed that really is distinctly different. And so it's a challenge to find the time to provide our special education teachers with really the wealth of support that they need, and ultimately to support classes. So today was a really important day for us in doing that. So the general education teachers worked with me, and Christine Rosner, Nancy Deacon, and then ultimately Joyce, Andrea, and Linda, in supporting them as they worked in small groups as well as large groups. We started the day mixed, so K-5 teams of teachers, so that we're having that vertical articulation and talking about classrooms across the grades, and then they spent other time working in small groups where they were grade level specific. At the secondary level, speaking of that November, of using Election Day, that is a very common day in Westchester, and as a result, there are many things offered around the region. So all of our PE teachers were at a regional conference for phys ed teachers. All of our art teachers were at a regional conference, and I want to say I'm missing one other group. So that really worked to our advantage, that we had those opportunities for our teachers, and another good example of where we didn't have to take them out during the regular school day, and they were able to engage with other educators across the county. And last but not least, our campus. So the campus was very department-based, so we had in some areas where K-6 through 12 were working together. In some areas, the middle school started using Sarah Rust to help them unpack their data of their state assessments. Each department was working on either some data analysis or curriculum development. And I know, Chris, you had a chance to be up here and saw some really good work.
Yeah, I spent a good part of the day on the campus and saw some really high-quality examples of the type of discussions we want to see our teachers engaged in, and it was a whole range of different activities, but in many ways, a lot of it centered around data use. I think of our math department, watching them, bless you, perform item analyses, and that not only looking at the specifics of which questions our students got right and got wrong, but the ones that they got wrong, which incorrect answers they selected, and what that tells us about how the students learned or attack those particular problems and to back into their own teaching in the language of the particular problems. Also watching math teachers engage in dialogue and development of some tools for students to engage in reflection related to assessment, and as students are completing tasks, to actually complete some parallel assignments where they're actually reflecting on areas that they struggled or met success in particular assignments or performance tasks. The English department, it was great to see them engage in some really powerful discussion around the honors identification process, looking to solidify the practices and to revisit what they're doing to ensure that there's a lot of alignment and belief from teacher to teacher. And that dialogue wasn't just high school teachers, it was that crossover of middle school and high school teachers engaging in similar dialogue. Science teachers engaging in assessment development, and then going off and working in smaller groups, working on a particular unit assessment. And aside from seeing our very enthusiastic custodial crew that was here engaged in some asbestos training and some other topics, I was with all of our instructional aides that worked with a consultant that was providing them with lots of turnkey training related to student management, supporting students, and the aides were so receptive in seeing how excited they were to think that they could walk out of that session today and have impact on kids' experiences tomorrow with the particular takeaways that they had. So it was really an exciting day district-wide, and one that I think will have lots of impact.
We did clerical training as well. We had the entire clerical team go over some business office items and review purchase orders and things like that.
Great to have the details about the staff having the learning opportunity.
Thank you. So now we'll turn to our committee reports. I think we'll skip B and G and do that last. So is there an update from communications?
So we caught curriculum for the last month right before our meeting. Policy, unfortunately, was canceled because of scheduling conflicts for individuals. We had wellness and sustainability yesterday.
Yeah.
Communications thing is going.
Okay, go ahead, Michael.
So one thing that Dr. Harrison mentioned that I left out of our conversations was that the last few months that Jay Ramos, our Director of Technology, had been sharing the work he was doing around the privacy that's up and active, and that people are concerned about using data in our schools, have a tool that they can use. Some other items we talked about around advocacy, and we sort of reviewed the timeline for different types of processes that would occur within our district when we want to communicate on items, and so it occurs in different ways, namely that each one has sort of a different timeline, that sometimes communications are sent by the board president or superintendent or both after review by the board, but that when there's anything that has sort of our full board input in terms of vote, then that's a resolution, and that usually takes a longer amount of time. So in terms of any advocacy that we want to be involved with. A lot of times we get help from the Westchester Putnam School Board Association in that they provide a resolution that we're all able to adopt. But we just have to be really cognizant of our planning to give ourselves enough time to get everybody up to speed on whatever the matter at hand is that we want to reach out to our region or state about or our community about. And so sometimes the faster way is just to use through the voice of our superintendent or our board president. So we were just being mindful of that. Additionally, we talked about looking into formalizing, looking into other districts' policies around just acknowledging and responding to communications that we receive, whether as administrators or and just having a more standard timeline for at least acknowledging when we receive emails, so there's a consistent approach and consistent expectation from people who communicate with us. We're talking about having some stakeholder meetings. We're looking into how to organize those. We look at the data around communications that we glean from, or to do a deeper dive around how we communicate with our community and our stakeholders, and then see what we can learn from stakeholder meetings. And additionally, again, talked about the privacy data, and we're something that was started last year and continues is there's a partnership council with our board leadership and administrative leadership and the partners in the community, the IES and CPSA and Booster Club are meeting, and so they have those opportunities to connect and review how they can help each other. So it's a great opportunity that continues.
Thank you. Yes.
So I'm just going to give the name heads, but since I think it's safe to say this was the first meeting of the combined Wellness and Sustainability Committee with new membership. So after introduction of everyone who was there were a couple of wellness updates. So the Wellness Committee has in the past been involved in food services, so offering feedback that is used in new contracts and making sure that the consultants who work on our food contracts were aware of what the community was looking for. So after the food services update and the introduction of the new manager of Paramount, who has started working with us, there was an overview for current committee members of pretty much all wellness activities that are happening right now in the district, which is a great list. If you're interested in having a look, I can share it with you. And then the latter part of the session was concerned with starting to look at what our sustainability goals might be and trying to look at in facilities is the current use of sustainable products, and then what are some of the current recycling initiatives, including those that are planned for in the new work with bond projects, and then a sort of brainstorming to begin talking about those things for the rest of the year.
Thank you.
I have sort of a question around that. I don't know how it'll be sussed out, but with sustainability being named as part of the wellness committee, clearly there's infrastructure components, such as some of our capital projects, which I would be writing that fit within D&G. So is there maybe a differentiation that sort of the infrastructure piece of sustainability maybe sits more with D&G, and then other aspects of sustainability are with the wellness and sustainability team? Or has that really been sussed out yet?
I don't think it's been fleshed out yet. I think there's a lot of synergies between the two, and there will be some overlap. I think it's going to evolve, it's going to evolve, and I think we need to see how it evolves. But certainly, since, Chris and I are on both committees, we can try to keep that going. Maria's on both committees, so, I think we have enough representation to really keep that in mind.
Great.
It's a good point.
I guess I'll just note that we did have as Michael alluded to, our first Strategic Partnership Council meeting last week. It was a productive meeting with leaders of the PTSA and IEF to hear about some of the different things that they have going on throughout the year and some of the ways that they are supporting the schools. And this was really the kickoff meeting for the year to just talk big picture of some of the larger things that will be going on. There'll be more details as the year progresses. So with that, we'll move on to our B&G update. I think I'm going to talk first for a little bit, but we do have...
I would just like to add one thing. The IS, I don't think we've announced it at a board meeting,
I don't
correct?
believe we have. You wanna-
Go ahead.
So, as many of you know, the Community Advisory Board is a community organization that's facilitated by members of the community, and it's comprised of student representatives from middle school and high school. Maria is one of the community members on the committee, as well as school administrators. A subset of the CAB organization is IASC-CAB, which is the anti-drug alcohol efforts. Going back 5 years ago, IASC's initial efforts came to reality when they were awarded a 5-year, $625,000 grant from the Drug-Free Communities Program initiative out of the federal government. We're pleased to announce on behalf of the entire organization, which is a tremendous partnership that really benefits our kids every single day, that IASC has been awarded another 5 years worth of grant funding for another $625,000. So when we think a lot of the great work that happens in our schools in and around drug and alcohol prevention and awareness, a lot of that is supported with funding through IASC. Speaker series, we have programs that will be coming up through the course of this year. We bring experts in, not only to work with our faculty and staff and parents, but are in classrooms with children, educating them. They support a lot of great events that will give our students productive ways to engage outside of school hours. They provide for bus transportation to the prom, so kids don't have eliminate that risk of kids drinking before driving to a prom. They also support 20% of our student assistance counselor salary that enabled us to extend the services to the high school, which was a service that had been cut many years ago. So we're really thrilled, and it is an amazing partnership that brings tremendous resources to our students and their families. Great. Thanks for the reminder.
So I guess now with that, we'll turn to our B&G update, and we have also with us Veronica from H2M, who you may remember from the pre-bond process, to discuss some of the aspects. And excuse me. So, just by way of background, B&G has been meeting pretty regularly since the summer to talk about the different projects and work on trying to sequence the work in an effective, efficient, and most cost-efficient way. So we'll be talking a little bit about that tonight in terms of how we've arrived at the groupings and present some of the design concepts that we've arrived at, which have really been a collaborative effort between the B&G committee, our professionals, and then also the various community committees that were convened to look at these, including one that was just yesterday, which provided some additional feedback. So I believe we've been able to incorporate that feedback into what we're seeing tonight as well. So, yeah, since I'm one-handed, you get to click. So, here's the basic agenda for tonight. The keys for us is, A, to review the scheduling, because tonight is an important milestone in that, where We'd like to, A, make the recommendations, but B, get the support from the rest of the board in terms of the direction, so we can direct Veronica to proceed and keep ourselves on schedule. And the projects that we're going to be talking about tonight are the enclosures for the campus, the vestibule at Dows Lane, as well as the campus learning pavilions and athletic area. Go next. So, now that we've got the bond passed, this briefly lays out what are all of the next steps. And really where we're at now is that red marker, which is the schematic design and design development part of the project. Yes,
So I
Caroline?
will just say that there are lots of different parts of this project, and we're up to that stage for one part of it.
Yes.
We're going to be up to that stage lots of different times, so we'll kind of keep telling you where we are for the different projects. So tonight, we're up to that for one part of it. And, some things will need your approval, some things, maybe let B&G just decide, like a boiler. There's not going to be a lot of, board discussion on a boiler, but certain things where we know you would want to have final say, that's when the B&G will say, we're going to bring it to the full board. So we're going to have to play that one a little bit by ear, but right now we're at that stage for this particular pieces of the project. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Right, so, what we do tonight is present the schematic design, so that way our professionals can take those forward and turn them into more complete drawings, which can then get estimated out by Triton and give us further feedback to make sure that what we've put forth as a design will meet within our budgetary requirements. Hopefully they will. If not, they'll come back and we'll have to have a further meeting to talk about some, tweaks that we may need to make, or value engineering decisions to, achieve both what we need within what we budgeted. So then, obviously, everything has to go to SED, so that's, the key part is to try to stay on schedule to get everything to SED in a timely manner. There's going to be 12 different projects over the course of the entire construction phase for SED approval. H2M will be leading that and preparing all of the applications, and there'll be things that will be submitted seriatim as they're ready, with the goal to get things there and approved within their cycle. We may be using, as we talked about during the initial process, some third-party review to speed things up, because we don't want to have SED become a bottleneck where we can avoid that. So obviously, both H2M and Triton, they'll prepare each project for the bid. They'll go out through bid. They'll do walkthroughs with the various people who are interested. The district gets the bids. Then between H2M, Triton, and the district, they interview the bidders, looking at the lowest qualified bidder for each project, and then make recommendations as to who to proceed with, which then gets sent back to us to approve the contracts, and the contracts will be prepared by H2M that we award. So now for the project scheduling, as we talked about, they're grouped based on their SED building number, and the schedule that we'll talk about shortly reflects all of the different phasing for the capital bond project. And we'll show you the grouping of how it's done by school and how we've tried to group it to be done in hopefully an efficient manner by minimizing disruptions, also recognizing that it'd be difficult to have both Dows Lane and Main Street School offline at the same time because of town camp. So we're looking to see what are the other ancillary impacts of our decisions to try to minimize those on the broader community. And here's where we start to get to the fun part. So here's the initial schedule. So if you looked on phase one, which is the left-hand column, that's what we're looking to try to start construction on in 2020, whether it's during school breaks for potentially smaller projects that we may be able to get further along, or over the summer, and then things that may go into 2021. So starting here at the campus, we have the bleachers with a accessible walkway and what's called a press box, but it's really a relatively small enclosure on top of the bleachers to allow for the games to be announced and to provide a platform which to videotape the different events going on. There'll also be, as you guys remember, the concession stand, restroom, and storage for our sporting equipment, which will also be combined with a learning space, which we'll show you shortly the schematic for. So that's what's on tap for the campus. At Dows, looking to replace the boiler there, get the standalone restroom put in place, as well as the small storage shed there. At the campus also, we're going to enclose the walkways and do some renovations at the middle school, and then also hopefully looking to tackle the LED lighting and card access doors in this first phase. Then the second phase, as you'll see, is the theater gym renovations, doing the work at the campus that focus on the high school, so that's the vestibule, the site work, and the renovations to the library. Both the high school vestibule and the renovations to the library, we think will take the most amount of time, both for B&G and other input. So that's why they're in the latter phase, to allow for those processes to play out over time, while still then getting enough time to get to SED so that we can meet our 2021 construction timing for that. And then also the Main Street renovations and site work will follow once we've done Dows the year before, so that way both those schools won't be offline at the same time. So now if you look at this next slide, so this outlines the work that's being done at Dows, split between both building improvements on the left and then new construction on the right. The bottom right with the color code talks about the different committees that will be touching those projects. So I'm not going to read all through, we can all look at it in our spare time, but there are both faculty and or community members who are involved in the different committees depending on what it is. So you'll see here a long list. The only two new construction items are both the standalone facilities storage area and the standalone restrooms, and then it's a whole list of building improvements, which you can see there, which we talked about really in the first phase of projects. A few things also that we didn't talk about is the AC. So we'll get the AC in the gym and abate the floor in the gym and work on the creativity suite at Dows. So now at Main Street, the work we talked about also in the spring, bringing AC into the Main Street School gym, and then all of the building upgrades there. I think that list hasn't changed since we saw it in the spring. Now if we move on to the campus, so again, you'll see we have all of the security work up top in, I guess that's purple, and then we have the improvements for the theater gym building with the AC and the upgrades to the theater. That's part of that second phase of work. Going, I think we have another campus slide. So right here, the specific high school improvements, again, the security ones at the top, along with all the other ones, including the casework that we've heard a lot about different times, and the additional spaces here in the library, and then most importantly, the facility storage building and the campus learning pavilion, concession stand, outdoor bathrooms, and the new bleachers and press box.
What gets a little interesting is that we have the LGA and the CMS buildings, and the LGA is aligned with the high school, the CMS building is aligned with the middle school, so that's part of how we came to some of our phasing and our determining of how you group things. So we spent quite a bit of time in the summer going through some of these things. It's not actually totally clear what's going to be in what phase here, but we kind of have a handle on it, and as we start to present these projects to you, we'll make that clear, and as it becomes clear to us too, as we work through it. So you have to bear with us a little bit as we go through this.
So this is the process that I spoke about at the beginning, where it's been a lot of work done at the B&G level, partnering with H2M to revise and tweak based on the feedback. And then we've had those community subcommittees which provide further feedback, additional revisions by H2M, and here we are tonight to bring it to the full board.
So I just want to add that these drawings that you're going to be seeing are what the committees, we looked at different versions, and between Alteris, our security summit, teacher representation, community representation, Irvington Police, board members, and various community members, we've kind of went through the various designs, pros, cons, and this is what the committee came up with for a variety of reasons. This is how we landed. So we're not going to go back and discuss the various reasons, other designs we're just making a recommendation now to the board.
Yeah, based on the process, this is what we're recommending tonight. Obviously, to the extent board members have questions, want to understand parts of the design, that's what we're here for, and that's why Veronica's here, so you can be able to answer questions. But if we go to the next slide, we have a rendering of the walkway from the middle school to the theater building. You know, one of the things that I'll point out that we spent a lot of time talking about was whether the space would be completely enclosed, in which case then you would need to heat the space and possibly even air condition, which would be an added expense. So what we've come up with is a design which at the very top, you can't really see it well in the picture, but above the windows is a series of louvers which will provide some ventilation and make it so that we don't need to provide heating or air conditioning in the space, and hopefully save on the cost of construction. So the idea is to try to match some of the brickwork in the surrounding buildings. That will be probably to what, about 2 or 3 feet, Veronica? Is that about 3 feet? Then with windows, and then the louvers above it.
And above the louvers is also some open space, because it does not go all the way to the ceiling in this
Right.
particular area. And some of the other ones it will, but not with this topic. You could probably explain that better now, I think.
Where the posts are.
Some sort of screening in there as well, keep birds and whatever from flying through there. But the intent is it to be open air, so if there is some natural ventilation, if we need to add mechanical ventilation, then we'll do so as well as mechanical and get into the design.
It only just occurred to me, would there be, it's not in this image, but could there or will there be any venting on the roof part?
There potentially could be. Our mechanical engineers haven't looked at it yet. If we put some sort of exhaust fans on the roof, I would propose to
I'm not
put them
saying
on.
fans, just like the building I live in, where we just putting, I guess these little,
Mushroom kind of fans or something.
not fans, nothing mechanical.
Okay, all right.
Just,
Yeah. So, yeah, just a little ridge vent.
Yeah, roof vent.
Yeah, so, I believe that roof is a standing seam metal roof, and so we had not proposed to open it up and put a ridge vent there. But we could look at, well, our mechanical engineers need to get into it, whether or not we're actually gonna need any more ventilation other than just the louvers and the open air space. And if we do, then we'll add something in. But I would not propose to open up the entire ridge across that. My concern would be, potentially, water infiltration in there, opening up an existing roof. So-
We did discuss if the mechanical
Yeah.
engineers were going to look into this, if need be, put in, it was discussed at the first one that we had missed, putting, that
Inline
Paul was
fans.
talking about,
Yep.
in the louvers,
Mhm.
putting in some sort of fan system in there to
Yep.
help circulate
Sure.
the air.
Mhm.
But it is, as Veronica said, and it is hard to see in this,
Yeah.
this middle picture, but the roof, it is going to be open in there. There is going to be air, which is why, do you want to speak about the flooring? Did you bring the sample?
I didn't bring the samples, but the next image, yep.
The next slide.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
Sorry, I jumped ahead.
Yeah, so this is the site plan that shows you the entire walkway and how the enclosure will look, as well as if you look to the left, where we're enclosing the area by the theater, gym building as well, which will be turned into a more enclosed space. So that way, our access is limited and controlled to just being able to get through the walkway into that building and not be able to circumvent all the security work that we're doing. So, and you'll see you'll see where the doors are placed, and there's gonna be benches built into the outdoor portion of the wall, so that you can see in the picture there alternating benches, and then I know we're gonna have to do a replacement work for the floor, since you were do you wanna talk about that a little?
So, part of the concern is because it is open at the top and we're putting these louver systems in. And currently, with the last bond project, when we enclosed the middle school and we created the double door system for air and all of that, we've kind of created a little, not a hazard, but water is pooling in between the two sets of doors that the custodians have to stay on top of when it's inclement weather. So, the flooring here is bluestone, big bluestone, and it needs to be repaired anyway. So the idea is to put down, this epoxy type of material on top, and it'll make it easier for the custodians to sweep and maintain it and keep it dry. You know, everyone needs to recognize that some of these changes are increasing the custodial staff's duties. But this was the recommendation. It's hardy, you could drive on it, because we're also going to be making a recommendation to put it in some of the other places that we are,
I'm sorry, are you referring to
the dark spots.
The gray.
The gray dark spots, these are bluestone currently. The white portion going from pillar to pillar, that's part of the design. That has to do with the structure of the pillars. We're not touching that. Technical, at H2M, but, okay, good. But these gray areas, we're recommending to put this epoxy type of coating on top.
with the existing surface?
Well,
No.
no, the existing surface is bluestone. We are removing it. We're going to fix the foundation and put concrete down, and then this gets put on top of it. Do we have the samples? I don't have the samples. We saw the samples, and they're kind of like a little gritty, so it also doesn't create like a slippery situation.
So the
Because
bluestone is being removed or is being resurfaced?
it's
Removed.
being removed, and we are resurfacing it.
And a lot of those segments are in bad shape as it is right now.
Right, and then. Right, and then as we enclose the school and the other areas that we're about to show you, you also have to remember that the custodial staff is gonna have to bring in equipment, like to mow the grass inside and to do certain things on the inside. So this also is heavy-duty, commercial grade, so the vehicles can go drive over it and will not compromise it or break it.
So just to clarify, there's some kind of composite or an epoxy which is replacing the bluestone. This is not
Correct.
bluestone.
Correct.
Yeah, let me,
Yeah, so the bluestone would be removed, presuming that there's some sort of gravel underneath it, so we're gonna remove that down. We're gonna add some additional drainage in there, because it's still an open air space, so potentially some water could get in there. So we're gonna tie new drainage in that area to the existing drainage that's essentially in this area as well as in the vestibule area. There'll be a new concrete pad that'll go in between each one of these gray areas, because each one of these lighter spaces are the existing concrete that we're using now. We're not touching any of that. So there'll be a new 4-inch concrete essentially sidewalk with epoxy that goes on top of it. As Maria explained, it has a slip resistance to it. It's a commercial grade, and that will coat it so it'll be, an easy surface to clean as well as, safe for walking on. So
Lawn mowing has to happen inside this area?
No,
I'm
this
sorry.
is the dust, this
That's
is,
continuing to be,
that is for another area.
Yeah, other area.
This is, the artificial turf that's out there where the middle school currently plays in.
And I just want to point out one issue with regarding the black development indoors right here, or that's out of the building.
Ryan, do you wanna highlight, the revised entranceway for the middle school?
Yeah, that's what I was getting to last, which is off to the right, and Frank, if you want to talk about that a little bit.
So, currently there is a
where the security sits, what's their visibility of the hallway? Are people, like, is that a,
Yeah, so, I mean, right now, we haven't really discussed a desk, so which way
Yeah.
the desk spaces, but I would imagine the desk would be something like that, where they really are gonna be able to look in all three directions. I mean, and maybe turning behind them.
yeah,
So they'll be able
I'm
to
just
see-
wondering on
They'll be
the,
able to see this way, they will,
that,
the view that
south,
they'll
south
have
side,
this way is only through the glass.
there's a wall on the south side, which is the upper part.
This would be glass, and then this is glass from, 3 feet
Okay.
up, so they'll be able to see, but only through the hallway.
But all four sides where security is, they can see out.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
It currently, it's where the security person is now.
Yeah.
They
So
just
if-
turned a little
yeah.
bit.
So if we go to the next slide, these are some of the other enclosures at the campus.
I'm not sure that I'm finished asking
No,
questions.
sorry.
So help me understand, currently, this is for entrance to the middle school
Yes.
theater building.
No.
No, theater is over here, middle
Theater.
school is here.
Theater's here, middle school's here, okay, sorry about that, yeah. So where are members of the public coming through? Where are they coming through? Okay, so parking lot is here?
Yep.
Yes.
It's basically the same door they're coming through now, only now there's two different doors, and we're gonna make it only one door. The other side will be just for students.
So the other side, students can get through unimpeded.
Right.
Correct.
Building to building.
From this space, which is a conditioned space, into the space was essentially for all kinds of an outdoor space, so we'll get that through there. Other than that, we'll be
A related question that I asked yesterday in committee is that, at the point when students are arriving or leaving, that's a lot of students, obviously cannot go through one door. So the discussion was around that there are multiple doors open, that they generally have monitors in the area where those doors are. And then once school starts, the other doors are closed, so you only have a single point of entry.
Okay, so there's still sufficient access from those large groups moving through. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, so if we go to the next slide, these are some of the other enclosures. You have the walkway from the middle school to the LGA building, and then you also have from middle school to the CMS building. So similar ideas, using brick, they'll match the existing brickwork, windows, and then doors where needed. And you can see at the bottom there is the little snippet of the site plan that shows you where where the different buildings are and where the enclosures now are going to be.
And the enclosures here are slightly different, where we were in the middle school play area, where there's a lot of balls and things going around and bouncing around. We were more concerned with it being as open as in this area with glass, so this is for seeing glass. But in the other area, it's a low masonry wall, there's the bench seating, as Brian Maria mentioned, also offers a little bit more security, but in this area, we're seeing glass.
And also, most of these are only one-sided enclosures. We're just now looking to keep the outside out, so we don't need to do both sides of these enclosures.
So that, yeah, it opens into the courtyard space.
Exactly.
And I'd also like, if I could add, these areas where we're seeing these glass enclosures, whether it's around an entranceway in a full-on storefront system or the passageway that's going from the middle school to the gym theater building, we're looking at putting safety film on the glass. That would make it even more challenging to penetrate the glass, to add another layer of security. And depending on the product that's utilized, there may also be some value in and around energy efficiency.
And can you also define what storefront system is for board members who don't know and
Sure.
anyone who's watching?
Yep, so storefront system is an aluminum and glass window system. Currently, you have it in the middle school entrance. It's the blue framed windows that you have over in going into the middle school. So it's about a 2 by 6 inch frame. It usually spans either 1 or 2 stories. That's what refers to storefront as opposed to curtain wall. And then there's 1 inch insulated glass panels in between. But if you walk out to the the vestibule of the middle school now, you would see that exact same system there. So it's a commercial window system.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So if we go to our next one, so this is just the area by the loading dock, which just shows where we're gonna have a roll-up garage type door to close off that area. So I think, this is an area that most people won't see, so I think there's really not much to this.
And I'd say the one thing that I would just note, when we look at this entrance as well as these other areas, we're actually kind of fitting things right into structures that already exist. So when you see, for in large part, the stonework that's present is already existing. Here we're inserting doors and glass in the areas where Veronica's pointing to. And then when we look at the other, there's a little bit of stonework, but the garage door is actually fitting exactly into the open space that our vehicles and equipment deliveries currently go through.
So if we go next, I think we have, this is the vestibule for the district office at Dows Lane, showing, Ron, if you want to just talk briefly about this.
So currently, the office at that way, there is existing storefront, two sets of double doors right here, and then another set of double doors here. So what we're proposing is to remove the doors in this location, and remove the doors in this location. It would be now one set of double doors, which meets the egress requirements we really put into a small security area here, so you can visitor and come in. There'd be a window here where they pass their credentials through, get checked in, and once they're approved, get the second set of doors to be open, and they will move through into the remainder of the Title III accessible security desk space.
Period, but, I mean, I guess just,
We're not there yet.
okay, so what we're looking at is essentially will be,
We're here, we'll get to that part.
Yeah.
Would you like me to talk about that at all? Or?
Yeah, let's go to the next slide. Yep.
I don't think
Oh,
that's.
well,
No,
let's
no.
go, right, sorry,
Yeah.
Would you like me to speak about that at all? Or?
oh, it's not here?
No, because we haven't talked about the materials for the front yet. That was just something that was
Right,
being kicked
right,
around.
right, okay.
This is going away.
okay.
But this does give you, the look of what the store, what
So
she was talking about, the
essentially,
storefront.
we're losing, okay, so this is two sets of two doors and then windows on the side?
Yes.
Correct.
Windows on the
Yep.
side.
And we'll look for some sort of a,
Protected.
there's existing stone panel above the existing doors, and when that sign is removed, there's gonna be some points or holes in that stone that can't be really replaced. We're looking to repair, so we're looking to replace that with something else. And then looking for some additional maybe pendant mounted lighting or something that can do that. So that's yet to be determined.
On the same level as the windows, or is it below the,
Hanging from the roof.
I understand
It's
that.
all, yeah, it's all to be determined.
All to be determined, yep.
Is
Yeah.
it literally the same level as the windows, or?
No,
I'm
it's-
sure that'll get sorted out.
Yeah, it's,
We haven't gotten there yet. This is now just for, this is the, we're now at big level conceptual, like, this is how the space is going to be arranged physically, because that's what the direction we need to give to HM tonight, which is physically this layout looks good and works, so they can now start doing the further design work to move things down the road.
So this is the main entrance to the Dows school, and right now there's existing storefront entrance right here. We're gonna replace it, but in the same location, at the doors. We're going to add additional wall and glass around it, to be security desk here, or there's security desk on the side. Yellow pieces with the right practice, and the office right off to the right. And similar concept where the window with a pass-through for the security access, and then once you get to security, you're to get into the floor of the main entrance to the school. Continuing on with the keys, and the keys off on the side.
Is staff just swiping together? Is that the ultimate expectation, that staff will just swipe together?
Yeah, so as one of the aspects of, back to the overall, like, overviews of the different phases listed in there is swipe card access. So that will be installed in every single one of our facilities. There'll be designated entrances that staff will be able to use
depending on the technology, we do, from their ID to a key fob to gain access. Like at the JCP.
Any other questions? Yes, if we go to the next slide, so here, this is the overall schematic for out by the field. We have the campus learning pavilion, which has an outdoor classroom paired with the athletic storage. That's the building on the right. And then the rectangle on the left is the bleachers with then all the different walkways to get to those different areas, which will be ADA compliant and accessible. And there'll be a gate right where the right there. There'll be a gate that will allow us to get our equipment off on and off the field and into the storage building. So that's the overall site plan. But now, if we go to the next slide, we'll see details of the actual buildings. So this is the campus learning pavilion. You'll see you got the arched roof, which matches the design of the theater building, theater gym building, so we're trying to tie that in aesthetically. And then you have, to the left of the half-curved roof there, that's where you have the, on top there, on that roof is where you have the outdoor classroom, and under that, directly under that is the concession area for the Booster Club to sell during games. Then to the right, you have both the trainer's office and then the entrance for the storage, and then around the side will be our outdoor bathrooms. Yeah. So see here, this is now looking, if you're looking from the sky down to the top, and you'll see you have about 700 square feet of an outdoor classroom space, and we're still obviously figuring out how that's going to look in terms of the aesthetics, but this is, the idea is to have a large space that will be flexible, so that classes can go out there, that during sporting events, there may be seating out there for people to sit and eat, but it will be, we're to try to design a space with maximum flexibility and with the idea that it will be a space that can be used throughout the day.
So the green is what, around the edge? So,
There's
sorry.
been discussion of planters there.
Okay, so there's fencing potentially and planters there.
We haven't gotten to
Well,
that
again,
level.
this is where the time frame gets tricky, because the committee had a lot of suggestions about whether or not we should have trees or this or that. So there's a lot of suggestions, a lot of notes that H2M took back based on those discussions. So we probably won't have the trees, depending on what we end up putting there. So, but we can't turn around the drawings that fast from one night to the next, so that's, yeah.
Because
so-
the planters were there, right,
Yeah.
and we had concerns about, people using the planters to step on and to,
So, but there was a lot of good feedback, and that they're gonna take all that into the final design here. But schematically, this is what it's gonna look like. Whether we have planters there or somewhere,
Right.
it'll look good.
Whether it's planters, guardrails, we don't need to be at that level for right now. We just need to be at the level of schematically, this is the overall footprint of the building, and so they can get to the next level of design phase. And then, as the committee continues to meet, we'll then have further discussions on the aesthetics and the finishing details.
So the height is
11 feet.
indicated over here. No,
Yes.
That's the total.
That's the
is
roof.
18.
Where you're standing in the outdoor space is 11 feet.
I think
But it's
the next
actually-
two slides, I
yeah,
think the
the
next two
next-
slides would help.
Yes, we'll get there in a second. So if you look at this next slide, this is how the building is partitioned. So you have the field storage area to the right with the trainer's office next to it. To the left is the concession area. Then you have the pantry area for storage, a little more storage, and then our two outdoor bathrooms. And if you go to the next slide, this now starts to give you an idea of the elevation. So since, as you recall, it's a hill there, so we, as much as possible, trying to build into the hill to minimize the overall height of the building and use the hill to our advantage.
In terms of what the public would be able to see of this, so following this meeting, you're saying this is part of the slides that are going to be, are already public, I think. So what you're showing in this, with that grade, X-grade, blue grade, is where the hill will be kind of filled out.
Yeah, so, go ahead.
So, yeah, so as Brian mentioned, the existing hill comes down about, down to the tank. So the intent is to cut away this section of it, to go into the hill, so you have accessible access to the roof of the outdoor learning space. So we've actually got 50 here that we're going to fill in order to, Will walks right from the hill, walk right onto the roof on the upper level. And then you can come around from the walkway on the side to get down to that lower level and get into the, whether it's the storage space or the distribution space.
So you're entering the other
Go back
rooms
to the east.
Yeah,
from the lower part or from the upper
You
part,
could,
or
no,
both?
you could,
It depends.
both. You could come down the hill here, you could go from in front, or you can walk right onto the roof.
So, got it. So if you're a student who is ability, has some need for so, right.
So the handicap accessible.
Handicap accessible entrances from above.
But this is also
Or the
handicap
classroom.
accessible as well, and in the
Okay.
bleachers, there'll be handicap-specific seating as well. The whole thing,
So everything has to be.
everything.
Yes.
Everything.
Absolutely compliant with code, so right from the parking area, so we're looking at the parking, right from the walkway, to, we're just working out what the grades will be in terms of what the ramp system will be down to this area to, over the car there and then concession stand, or we can, the walkway over to the PV area, and then we can, actual grass pulling area down, the hill that, and then a walkway across to the bleachers and from, again, all the way to the sidewalk.
So, will the hill piece that everyone likes to sit on still be available?
The hill will still be available.
Multiple places?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
So I do have some questions, but I'll bring them up later related to that.
yeah, the hill space that's still about 112 feet from the bleachers that we're pulling down, these concession stand goes. So, and if you got there, I believe Mr. Weather has worn it out, the actual bleacher space has been marked out with paint, so you can see the footprint of the bleachers as well as the footprint of the new facility, the campus learning facility. The only thing I'll note is that when we staked out the campus learning facility, it was 10 feet closer than where the pavilion now is pushed back a little bit. It gives a little bit more space to the front.
So if we go a couple forward and more, right, so now this is at least the initial rendering for the bleacher press box. So, you'll see, again, we're trying to incorporate more branding and signage in it, so using the Bulldog logo, Irvington, so that way, as you come up the hill, you'll see it, you'll know where you are. There's still, some details in terms of the exact type of seating that is going to be available, but in terms of the general footprint space, this is what's being proposed, and it's seating for, I believe, approximately 650 students. The idea being that we want to be able to sit at least the entire school in the bleachers, because whether it's a high school pep rally out there or some other activity that we may not have thought of yet, but in order to have entire school to be able to sit there together for whatever may be going on outside, not just a sporting event.
And the top picture shows the committee would like the back of the risers to be, to have this panel, a green panel, so as you're looking at it, it hides it into the grass, right? And it's less obvious, and it's neatly to the neighbors just up from the field.
So the panel, that
On the back of the riser.
on the back of the rider? Yeah. Got it. So there's like a solid piece in there rather than kind of.
It's actually painted.
It's painted,
Guaranteed, yeah, warranted, so.
For the actual seating surface itself.
Okay, happy to hear more about it. Are they warranted?
They are, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they are warranted. There's a slight increase in cost, but they are.
That's good news, Mike.
Excuse me?
I think it's great news,
Yeah.
both in terms of further, that it's both spirit-wise in our color, but also less obvious in terms of with a silver or reflective aluminum stand, which just will seem like all you can see when you come up the hill. And for our neighbors also, it would be a benefit for them.
The lighter the color, less heat absorption, the darker the color, more heat absorption, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and middle color is sort of the best of
Yeah.
both.
Mhm.
And I know that, having been to a lot of events, that generally ours and other schools don't fill the bleachers for most things. And so the bright aluminum on a sunny day is just like bouncing a lot of light. So I think the opportunity to have the backing risers as well as the seats, a more muted color, less heat, less flare, less obvious in terms of standing out from the back. I would certainly, I guess what I'm saying is if that sounds good to you, I hope you support that.
One of the things we'll do is as H2M draws the construction documents, and ultimately we get approval for it, but when we write the bid specs, which really comes from the construction documents, some of the things will be listed as an alternate. So depending on the cost, we can say, we'll do the bottom part, or we'll do the bench part, or we'll do all of it. So like we'll have it different segmented out, so we know how these bids come out, what we can afford. Because you don't want to get yourself in a situation where then you have to rebid everything because it's just too much money, and then you have to redraw everything and resubmit stuff. So but that'll be something that we keep in mind, and we just keep adding layers. So hopefully we can get all these things in there. I'm hopeful.
Can we go to the next slide? So this shows you.
I don't understand the measurement
Go back. Sure. Just simply just point to the slide that indicates.
So,
I'm looking for all the dimensions.
That's where we
The
were,
height would be a future.
the height, yeah, if we go to.
that's where we were getting to the next slide.
See the width,
Sorry.
the width and the depth.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's about 126 feet wide, the entirety of the bleachers, which, and then we'll go to the next slide, you'll be able to see the elevations. So this is if you're looking at the bleachers from the side instead of straight on, and you'll see, both the bleacher elevation as well as how it looks then with the press box on top. And again, it's built into the hill so that the hill is taking some of the height of the bleachers.
So, if I know, so this is the slope of the existing hill. So you can park out a little here, and then you get down, or the new fencing come right here, that's about what the fencing is for the existing fencing, and you have to go here, carry that line down, so then the car can work out, and then it's easy. At this point, so from the fence up top, the back of the fence box is 40 feet, and at the 40-foot point, the bleachers, the bottom of the bleachers is about 7 feet up the hill. And then you have an additional, about an additional 40 feet for the fence box as well as the guardrail on top of it. And this drawing really explains, the concern about what is going to be seen from the neighboring properties, so we created this drawing, this is based on the actual survey at this point. So here's the existing, fence box features, this is your football field and the track, and then this is the existing hill and silver way back, and
The view from the other end? The view from the other side?
what
Up to the south. Yes, the field point side, the parking lot side.
No, that's Dearman, up there is Dearman.
Just wondering if you have an image like this.
We don't have it from the
We
other.
do not.
Is there a way to get one at any point? Just to see what the impact of that stand would be from that
There's
angle?
a lot of
Oh,
property
you're not gonna be
between,
able to really see it.
there's a lot of property, there's a
lot of
building
stuff
there.
There's,
Because you're looking basically at
because
the,
it's on the other side.
you're looking at the theater gym building.
Yeah.
block.
You have all your buildings there.
I'm trying to get at what the image would be like if I wanted to sit on the hill and watch the game as opposed to stand at the hill with the stand blocking my view. So if I can't see what it would potentially look like from the other end, I'm looking at it from Allison's side.
If we go back to the, if we go back to the site plan again?
Look at both this 6'6" piece and then also this.
Right. Now, by the big tree on the top right, like that, by the view from down.
So from this, you're about 6 feet from the hill to the, here, the hill moves off at 200 feet, following the hill in such a feet. So, yeah, you're still behind this area. This area is all over here. We started into the rendering that showed that view, but,
The
well,
other,
typically the bleachers are centered on the football field. So if that's,
Got it.
the other
If I
thing,
could just speak to, because we just going to discuss about it, I admire this work that's going on, and it's been looked at from a lot of different angles, but this is the area where I have had some questions as well. And there's different benefits depending on how that the stands are set. So as you just heard, they're placed where they are so that they're along the center 50. As we heard, for our schools, the ideal of having it be 650 allows for the high school student body and teachers to all be able to sit in that at one time, which is not something that's been a possibility before. Additionally, the space underneath the 6'6" height allows for some additional track equipment to be placed underneath it safely, because you can have like a little door and put hurdles, for example, underneath it.
Actually, Chris, can you just go ahead, a couple slides? Okay,
Yeah,
just one more. Yeah, so that top right will be able to have a similar type of space underneath the bleachers. We'll be able to do additional storage for hurdles and other outdoor equipment that can be secured, because it'll all be behind fencing, but will give us additional storage.
Yeah, and as you said in the offhand, David, before we started the presentation, our culture in terms of watching events is a good chunk of us like to sit on the hill, but as you pointed out, on the other hand, we haven't had stands like this before, so you might make a different choice going forward.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, I do think it's a really important consideration to try and balance all those different concerns. How, can we get, the size so we can hold events that are being suggested and store some of this additional athletic equipment. So additionally, is there a sweet spot where we can also have less obstruction of that area? And so there's one thing that Veronica had shared, which is that we have to remove some land when we make the building, and that can be moved over to that hill and further increase the height. But additionally, one way to, I wonder if there's a sweet spot in which it's possible to make the width a little longer, and in doing so, you maintain the number of seats slightly lower the height of the stand. Not the middle part, which will always be about the same for that press box, but at least on the corners, which impacts people who are trying to see from the field, would lower it depending on the opportunity by a foot or two potentially, and increase the visibility. So maybe the combination of a slightly higher elevation and a slightly lower stand still gets us all the seating, the field storage, and the better visibility. So I'm hoping that's something that we can
Well,
still explore.
remember we discussed that, and there were a couple of concerns about that idea, was then you're creating a smaller storage area because you don't have the height.
Right,
So they
but
would-
it was framed into all or nothing, so I think that what I'm saying is there a sweet spot?
What I'm saying is that's something that we have to consider. I'm not saying no. And also, the athletic trainer I'm also a little leery of the idea of moving maybe some of the dirt, but the sports trainer also told us that the sport teams that practice here use that hill for a lot of drills. So we don't want to take away the hill. So I think if we add dirt there to kind of plateau the top and create too big of a hill,
Right,
we're
no,
taking
it's
something
that's
away.
another part to mention.
Right.
Again, I think it's not I mean,
No,
That is
it's
because
just all part of consideration.
right, somebody threw out the idea of extending it all the way. I think that's not a
Well, yeah,
possibility
yeah.
based on that, but I think there's the idea of increasing the width by a certain number of feet. That's much different than all the way. And in doing so, you can reduce some of the height and you still have a hill. So I think, I think there's a way to make all the adjustments so you're still, you have a less, that the stands rise not quite as high off of the hill so that we can still maintain. That's gonna be one of the first things that a large portion of people who come to see an event will notice is, oh, I can't see the field. And I think there's a way to keep the hill for the students to run up it, keep some of the storage for hurdles, and also, and keep the size in terms of a large number of students, and be able to see from that spot in the hill. So I think that's what, I'm just saying, I think and you're saying, that we need to play with that some more to see if there's a sweet spot.
Does the approval that we're being asked to make tonight permit any further modification of this, or are we really locked in by this SCD approval process?
Good question.
So at this point, if the district was to give us approval to move forward with the design, we'd be going forward with whatever the decision is that's made tonight, and then the cost estimating for that as well through Titan Construction. If we need to go backwards and change the design at some point, there's, the time delay and potentially costs associated with that. My bigger concern would be in changing the drawings, the later submission to SED, and how that affects the overall schedule of the project and completing that or starting this work next summer.
So I would find that personally problematic, because I thought we still had flexibility, and if we're saying we don't have that flexibility, then really encourage us to urge me to go back and look at the stands.
Well, you weren't there for that walkthrough, Michael, but now hearing, because this is exactly the conversation we had when we were doing the walkthrough, and now that we have the numbers, when we were standing there, we were talking about that. So I'm not as concerned about as I was before we got the actual numbers of the height.
But we've never truly addressed the concern that has been raised about the visibility from that site, and so I feel like.
But that's
given our-
exactly what we did that day.
Well, I'm saying that we're doing a community service if we don't further explore it, because right now it seems like it's very high and obscure and large section. So
I think just when we discussed this last night, and I don't, Veronica and her associate Cole were doing some back of the envelope kind of calculations and looking at removing a couple rows and how much further we'd have to extend the bleachers. In doing so, let's say we took the top 2 rows out, we were going to be adding 5 to 6 feet on either side of the existing bleachers. But based upon the elevation that it would still be out, in addition to the reduction of the storage space that was mentioned, the belief was at the moment that we would only further obscure the sight lines by cutting further into the hill, because now you're looking at more obstruction in front of you. So it's not just the height of the bleachers, but then you look at the backs of the individuals that are there. So in reality, you're going to be pushing people further up the hill to see something, but the near side of the track in the field could potentially be obscured.
What about that land idea, making it higher?
If we were to elevate it,
A minute ago, that you,
We're certainly going to take the fill that's in this area, and it's the most economic thing to do is keep it on site somewhere. So putting it here and moving it to the grade is to get it up a little bit higher. So it's a combination of those things that will enhance the hill, make it a little bit higher.
what you're saying is that this drawing intact will preserve that sort of cultural spot that people like to watch the
It's going
games.
to preserve a majority of it, but it's not.
Right, understood. Understood.
And in reducing it by taking about two rows out, you're probably down to about, say, 4 feet or so underneath the bleachers. I think then if storage is critical, I think you do use that storage area because it's just not going to be accessible.
It wasn't clear to me that we were so locked in with this because there was discussion about exploring it, and now we're being suggested that there isn't time to explore. I personally am thinking that we need to have a better understanding of it before. That's something that I think is something that a lot of generations of people to this day continue to enjoy. If we don't truly understand what that will look like and what that will do for that space, then we're just doing it wrong. I think that we should understand that better, we should understand that better before we move.
But I think we do, I mean, in terms of, you're not gonna be able to stand right at the corner and see, but if you go 15 feet to the right, you, at that point, we'll be able to see, and if we add some more fill, you'll be able to increase that area even more.
Can you get us a picture of what that might look like?
If the district is interested, we could do a rendering.
Yeah, but-
Yeah, that we can produce a rendering that could give you the perspective, like, of standing on that hill at certain points. We certainly can do that. We can, and my concern is just the overall schedule and how the time to produce those documents and the review and the approval of it pushes out the completion date. But I understand how important it is, so whatever the
But
district
also
wants
what's
us
the
to do, we
cost
can
in
certainly
terms
do.
of producing the additional rendering?
Correct, yep.
That's, I guess Brian's making a point.
Oh.
We're asking-
Yeah, there would be,
There is a cost, do we
yes,
know
there would be a
about-
cost to produce the renderings, yes,
Ballpark?
a couple of $1,000s.
And how
Why
quickly
wouldn't
could
you
we get
produce
it?
the renderings from the other side to begin with? So-
It's not a standard practice in order to include, we can't project what type of renderings.
Not everybody uses the building the same way.
I'm just asking why, when you draw something, you wouldn't draw from all perspectives
Well,
to begin with, rather than charge per other, but I guess.
Because
that's-
how the job was spec'd, it wouldn't be a typical
Yeah.
point of view that would be illustrated in a
That's
project
correct.
like
Yep.
this. If we were looking to build a full-on school building, there would be modeling and the like,
Sure.
we would be able to actually do this, but
This is a
in
unique
this case, it
situation.
hadn't been specified in what we required of H2M and other applicants.
Can you just remind us the total cost for this area that we're talking about?
we look, I think it was
One
about
point-
1.9.
Yeah, 1.7, 1.8 million.
Right, but the bulk of that is in the building,
building.
not the bleachers.
Right. So we can further investigate it, if that's what the district desires to do.
And how will access be to that outdoor top part there,
Yeah,
up on top of the building?
This is, there'd be, sidewalk walkway that you literally walk right onto it.
Games will be viewable from that location?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. It's actually,
Yeah, well, we haven't decided yet how those spaces will be used during events, but there is the possibility that there could be tables up there, or people could stand up there to watch games. We haven't decided yet what the policy will be, but it would provide a viewing area.
right. I believe there's a future slide that shows sort of an image, it's a little bit grander scale, but yeah.
I guess I would ask, do you support or not support the idea of doing the rendering so that we are assured that we're comfortable with what we're doing versus finding out after the fact that it's not.
What's the timeframe
Yeah,
to
we're-
produce the rendering?
And
Can we
what will that do
approve
for
everything?
schedule-wise, what will that do?
So it really depends on look at a couple, say 2 weeks to produce the renderings. So we're probably into like the third week in December, right around Thanksgiving, depending on what a board meeting would be. We'd probably lose about a month on the overall schedule, getting it submitted to SED, which would put it at about a March 1st submission to SED. And then I'd start to be concerned that this project would not be, it would,
March, we're not going to be able to.
we're not going to, you're not going to get a building permit in time to bid it for the summer. And it is, this portion of the work is critical in the sense that we want to we want to build our way out of the site. So this is the furthest thing away, and so we're going to, the press box and the bleachers, then the athletics building, and then work our way out in, so into the next summer.
Can you submit it as is and then shrink the size of the stands later? Because that's another option if we do the rendering and decide that
you're supposed to be getting a building permit on what is actually, you're actually constructing,
So how's this? Could we give approval on the vestibules, on the concession stands, and do all that, and just this portion of
Absolutely.
this, wait, will
Yeah.
it impact, or do you literally start on all aspects of this at once if we
We're
go
not
tomorrow?
gonna, we're not gonna start on all aspects at once, so if we need a little bit more time, when we go back to the team, we'll talk about the schedule and see what we can come up with and what is the real drop dead date. I think that's what we need to do.
I mean, besides, I'm wondering if there's another compromise. Instead of an actual rendering, if somehow we can mock.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, the area of the size of the bleachers is already sprayed out there. If we could sit there and mock it to
Put a
see
post
what
with a yeah.
a
Yeah.
post where the height would be,
Yeah.
and we can do a walkthrough outside as a group and
Sure.
physically see it.
Probably better than a rendering.
And that would probably be better than a rendering, and we could do that more quickly.
Yeah, we could stake that, yeah, we could work with Gary to stake that out.
We could do that, right.
I'm just fascinated, 2 weeks, roughly fiction.
It's probably upwards of probably 80 hours to produce a computer rendering or something like that. Yes. Yeah, yeah, it's,
And
Yeah,
we're
so-
saving money.
yeah,
So,
and we can
But I
certainly
guess-
assist you with, in terms of staking that out.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, so, I mean, I think everyone's good with the building piece. It's the bleacher, but I guess, I mean, I'm comfortable with the bleachers as is, but Maria,
I mean, now that you've done, because when we did the site visit, we had not yet had the survey yet. So personally, I'm also comfortable with this, now knowing the actual height of 6 feet 8 inches. So I'm now comfortable with this, but I went on that site visit. Brian and I did the site visit, so I I
would
understand.
like to visualize it.
Yeah.
I'm good with your suggestion, I don't need to get it with drawings.
Yeah, no, I think that would be a good thing.
I think there are points about the, and we all know the board members, I'm the one least likely they were supporting that. However, I'm aware of this sort of cultural aspect that I've observed, that I appreciate you bringing, that I think is so important to people in this community.
Never watched the game from
can we
another
get, do you think we could get it staked out by the end of the week possibly?
We would do that.
Yeah.
We'll have it done by the end of the week. And the one thing that I want to say, and like, I totally respect that hill. I've been on that hill for 8 consecutive years. When there was my family, so I totally get that. But the one thing we have to own and acknowledge, this construction is going to change that culture. To Dave's comment before, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to move from the hill to choose to sit in seats. There's people that are going to choose to stand on top of the building. There will be no bleachers on what is the current parking lot side of the building. So that's going to change the dynamic. There's going to be area for lawn chairs and things that'll be there on that side where the current tower is. I think this in general is going to lead to a real shift in culture in itself. So I think we have to own and acknowledge that no matter what we end up with, it's going to be, the vibe is going to be different than what it is today.
I mean, to that point, though, I would say we'll always, because we are a school and families and children of different ages, there'll always be children, and they love to run around there, and the parents stay in that area. So I think that part will always remain a part of whatever that new dynamic is.
I think we got a good solution, though, to try to figure it out, right?
I think Maria, once again,
That's a really good compromise. We don't need
So
other-
we'll let everyone know when it's staked out so people can come see it, but I think other than that one piece, I think everything else that we're hearing is, everyone's good on. So, yeah.
Yep.
So awesome.
And it's a prefab, just so you know, it's not this fancy, it's a prefab.
The building is unbelievable.
Thank you, Veronica.
Maybe just like that.
Nope, no.
There's the color piece.
So what are
It'll
the
be my fault.
colors? So we understand.
Two different types of finishes, like.
So it wasn't like one was the warranty option?
No, they're all warranted. Just construction code can be one.
Everything but the bleachers.
Okay.
So,
I don't know where we are.
Just to
so everyone
bring it
to
back,
bring it
Dave?
back.
Just
So,
tell me where we land. We're gonna look at the thing and then,
right, so I think my understanding is that everyone is good on everything other than they want to see the staking out of the bleachers to see if we want to tweak the bleachers. But everything else that's been presented, everyone's good with. So we can tell Veronica that they can go ahead with the next level of design on everything other than the bleachers. The bleachers will get staked out hopefully by the end of the week. Maybe we'll have a board field trip this weekend or something on Sunday afternoon and go look at it. And then we can circle back and tell and deal with just the bleacher piece.
You,
So,
May I ask one question, please? Just
yes.
going back to the first thing you showed us, that long pathway between the enclosed walkway.
Slide number 14.
This one or the other one? It doesn't matter, just,
Okay.
so, and forgive me, I'm trying to collect my thoughts, and I was not able to review this, before this meeting, so I don't want to hold anyone up.
Made sense then.
No, but because I think we're learning about the fact that opening this meeting, as you say. So what kind of additional upkeep would this require? It wouldn't have, I mean, you just got to.
I just think more of the expectation of it staying cleaner, it'll be a little bit higher than when it's completely outside. So when you picture something that's completely outside, if it's a little wet or, gritty, people know it's outside. But now, once you have that feel of it being inside, people are going to have a little bit of a higher expectation of it being cleaner. So we're going to need to sweep it cleaner, we're going to need to run the burnisher over it, whatever we got to do. So there's just that expectation. It's still technically going to be an outdoor space, so it's not like, you're going to eat off that floor, so it's going to be that clean. But it'll be cleaner than probably the outside floor.
There's ledging, because of the storefront, there's ledges there, there's glass now, like we're adding to,
The one thing that I think we have to be really mindful of, so when we think later this year, we'll have a discussion and an update of our financial plan and our staffing plan that will fold into whether our current or future year budgets. This definitely increases square footage of responsibility for our custodians, which we're already understaffed in those areas. So when we think about, there's glass that has to be cleaned in all of these areas, inside and out. There's dusting and cobwebs and all that's going to occur. The idea of the new flooring system that'll be installed, Gary said that we have 4 scrubbing machines, cleaning machines. We'll be able to run them over this space, but you're still going to have to sweep. And to Carol's point, there's going to be a higher level of care. And as I think, Michael, you may have said in the meeting last night, than someone walking by and picking up the random pieces of paper that may blow across the ground. Now or an electric leaf blower clearing the space, that we're actually cleaning it like you would a hallway. Maybe not with the exact frequency, but it's more square footage for our custodians, which will add another stressor to their daily responsibility.
As will cleaning the outdoor bathrooms, and the other
But
spaces.
this is a whole new building.
Right. So, we at some point have to have
But
that
there's a
conversation.
give there somewhat, because now we can keep our buildings closed,
Right, on the
and
weekends.
we're not also
Right.
draining our buildings.
I haven't really looked at that financial part of it yet, but that'll all be part of our analysis.
Yep.
People running through the campus during a game will not
Right,
have.
we're gonna be able to close the buildings on a game day, and not allow people in.
So there's the advantages as well.
Great. When does that analysis happen, so that we all know?
It's kind of part more of the budget, those are more part of the budget considerations, because that's staffing.
Okay, great.
So I guess that ends our update portion. I guess now would be a community comment time, but as there is no one left, we will skip that part and now move on to our consent agenda.
Thank you, that was really great.
No.
thank you.
Thank you, Veronica.
Yes, because I wanted it comparatively.
Yeah.
I can't approve that.
I was fascinated by
the staffing chart? Okay, sorry. Are we at the consent? Sorry.
No, we haven't, what?
No,
No.
no, no.
Yeah, so we have a motion to accept the consent agenda.
So
No.
I'm
We
sorry.
have a question. We'd like something pulled out.
At 8.1, to discuss the organizational chart in more detail.
So we can still discuss once you have a second, but if we're not
Yeah,
gonna,
we're
if you're
just
not gonna vote to
accepting it,
move
we're
it,
not
then
voting on
pull it out.
There's two options. If you want to just ask questions, you can ask questions. If you think you might vote no or abstain, then you can pull it.
Then I'd like to pull it.
Yeah, me too.
So we're gonna pull 8.1 out of the consent agenda.
Okay, so without 8.1, can we have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So I'll note also we have some additional retirements this week. Both Michelle Sella and Colette Dupre announced retirement. With Ms. Sella's retirement, that may be the last of the teachers that I had who is now leaving the district, so that's a personal note for me. And I think that is all we have on the consent agenda for this evening.
That's 8.1.
Yeah, so we now talk about 8.1.
So in terms of, do you want to go first?
Go ahead, no, you go first.
So, I had some questions about the staffing chart table of organization, which I understand is going to be a publicly shared document. I had some concerns about the fact that the way it's organized, it looks at our staffing as a K through 6 and then a 7 through 12. And in light of the fact that we're looking, and this is something that's supposed to be usable, I understand there's the idea of just counting people, but there's another level of organization that makes visual where the people are. And I wanted to know if it was possible to have some second page or a pull-out section that made that clear to people who are looking at how our staff is placed, for example, in buildings.
So I would say that that would be a separate and different request. These folks are grouped by broad categories, and some of the references that you mentioned are actually aligned with certification areas. So it's not by accident that you look at things that happen like through 6th grade, because certifications flow through 6th grade. And then there's 7 and above in given areas. We followed a model that was provided by the auditor that the board hired. He gave us a model to implement, and we followed the direction that was given within that. So this is something that is just a general head count for you to be able to track how many employees you have as a school district.
This is a result of the people.
Yeah, I understand, but that's based on a particular model from a particular school. And I know that David, I think, has seen other models, and so has my colleague here to my left.
And I guess just for me looking at it, I can't approve something in a silo. It helps to look at things on a comparative basis to really understand what's happening. Because to me, it's just like looking at numbers on a page with no context.
So I apologize for pulling it out, but I really did, I overlooked it, but, I apologize. I do, but we had talked about it, I just didn't open up.
We'll talk about it later. We'll talk about that part of it later.
It's not a table of organization. I don't know what.
David, it's one model, so I'm saying it was given to us by a human resource professional. So to Aaron's point, we're saying that it was something to compare it to. So if the board has a different desire, we would like something, what is that comparison? What is the point of reference that you're looking at? So if there's another example the board would prefer, this doesn't take 80 hours like a rendering, but it does, but I gotta tell you, it does take a good amount of time, because the layers of going through to make sure that every point one shows up in the right places.
But I was-
I'm sorry?
Is it like with beds where it's like, looking at licenses, that kind of thing? Is that what he's recommending? When I hear table of organization, I see, like kind of you described, even my own version in my own school building, right? Where it's
Yeah.
Principal.
No, that's an organizational chart. These are two different purposes.
Yeah, this is how many people work for us, and here's their role.
Yeah, this is just the head count. So realistically, like, when we think about where we were in 2008, and we go back and say, geez, X number of positions were cut, well, you can now be, with something like this, you don't need us to sit back and calculate things. There'll literally be an annual update on your FTE count from year to year. And there can be notations, there can be different structures, but it's literally a head count.
It says
Number of belly buttons you employ.
I get that, it just says table
of organization, and when that was given
That's
to
the,
me in that
that's
way.
the terminology that was utilized.
Well, it's not. I mean,
Yeah,
if you
got
want to
that.
call it, you know,
Headcount.
number of employees, it certainly reflects that. Annual role of FTE.
So is it the title that throws you off? Because I think what you thought an organizational chart is.
Staffing chart or table of organization.
There's a head count, like you
Yes,
just said, that's different.
that's what it is.
That's what it is.
So and for purposes of the audit and communication with the auditor, what was generated was exactly what he had modeled, and we utilized the terminology that he has used with us, that's written in the report and he's used with us verbally. We use both terms there. If there's a different term you want us to use, we can use that, but we're just trying to be consistent with, we want to be able to deliver on every recommendation. So he's verbalized things to us, and there's things that are in writing, so we're mirroring both.
The purpose seems more like a head count.
And that's what it is.
That's what,
That's exactly what it is. For you to know how many people
Well, in light of
you employ.
other questions concerning shared staffing and other things that have come up, and our most recent presentation on who provides certain services within the district, which was very illuminating in terms of, for example, people who wouldn't show up on here. I think that having a title like this is actually misrepresenting what it is, which is why it led to so many questions that I had about it.
So what's the process for changing the title?
We change the title and
Staff count.
Can we get historical data? Actually not a head count.
It's staffing by certification.
Right, it's not a head count.
So what,
We call it
It's an
staffing by
FTE.
certification.
Is it an
That's exactly
FTE
what it
count?
is.
So then call it staffing by certification.
Can we revise the
By
document here?
certification or if you have non-certified.
Rain, is it an FTE count? That's a
So how
misrepresentation.
about this?
You come back
Raina, there was a
with
question from Erin. She
Yeah.
wants to know, is it a count of FTE?
Is it more like an FTE count then?
This is FTE, yeah, this is FTE.
It's an FTE.
By certification, add a parenthetical if you want then. Say approval, well, it's not approval, staffing chart, table of organization,
Okay.
parenthetical,
Employee.
FTE.
organized by.
Leave it in your
Yeah,
hands
yeah,
to come
yeah,
back.
why don't you come back with a title based on what you've heard?
But I would say somewhere it should be duly noted.
Because I think there is,
Trying to align with the HR audit, and
Right.
so,
but there is the two pieces, which is the certified and the non-certified, so.
I still have one other question. Is it possible to get any historical information, just for context?
Well,
Any historical information?
That's not the point, it never existed before.
It didn't exist.
No, I get that this didn't exist either when we created it. Can we go back in history to create something?
well, I guess anything can be done, but
What's
I
the
guess I'm
purpose?
being mindful
For
of,
context, because it's just like looking at.
Because there was the staffing plan that was done around this time last year, which has that.
Yeah, so what, I mean, I guess I had a similar question in my weekend update questions. What I wonder is can we call this document for this year staffing by certification? Come budget time, I would like a historical, so I'm wondering if that's something that we could get a few years back.
so again, we can't call it staffing by certification, because that's not an appropriate title. Not everybody on there is a certified,
Certified and non-certified staff.
I honestly believe that the appropriate title, if you don't like the one that Peter suggested, then the other appropriate title would be FTA
Or just staffing charts.
or staffing chart.
Yeah, just
I
call
would,
it
I would
staffing
not
charts.
put the word certified in there. I think it's a misrepresentation.
So, since this isn't a pressing issue, why don't we just table it till we figure out the title?
Thank you.
I agree with that.
And I think if the board is so inclined, just a couple of us, maybe not to ask it,
Wait,
I'm
hold on,
not
hold on.
understanding.
I'm making a clarification. I'm not saying something's happening yet.
No.
Yes, but I don't have time for that discussion right now, so we can talk about that separately.
Well, but in terms of what she was looking to understand, that's a piece of it. So if you come back and you haven't addressed the question, don't you get the same
But I
question
don't-
next time?
No, so here's my question. Why?
That's
Why-
fine, you can ask that question, but then
Yeah,
you're having the,
yeah.
then you're having the conversation I was just having.
Right.
Okay.
Well,
Which
but
was
you're
saying
having
that-
a side conversation, so this is a public board
Right.
meeting, let's have the conversation in public.
That was public.
Yeah, no, but.
No,
it was a
all the little
side-
conversations down here is not public, that's the problem.
So here's the question, let's just dial this back, everyone. You're asking for historical data, same chart historically, to put it into context.
Why?
Why? What is that? I don't understand.
Yeah.
what
Because
that
I don't
means.
know, I have no idea what if one of the numbers is incorrect. I'd have no way to say, like,
But-
this
but-
is right. That's how I analyze data.
Yeah.
It's our job to tell you
Why,
exactly.
Peter, can I say why the recommendation was made?
Yeah,
Right, because I think that's really what this is about, right? It's the context, where did this come from? So I think what Peter noticed when he was doing, working through the audit, was that we didn't have a record that was easily reconciled each year, right? So let's say through the budget process, excuse me? I'm telling you, yeah. So reconciled each year. So what would now happen moving forward is this becomes the benchmark document. And moving forward, let's say through the budget process, you decide that you're gonna hire another elementary teacher. That's where, so what Peter was saying is we should have something that we can go back and say now, well, we had 57 elementary teachers. In 1920, we added an elementary teacher, and we can see that we now have 58 elementary teachers. So it really is a way to look back, it is a way to look back over time, but to actually have somebody spend the time now to recreate it, I would ask the same thing, like, I'm not sure to what end. I think Peter was saying that as a district, it's important that we have a record of what we're doing, and if we're eliminating a position. So, for instance, sometimes or someone's certification changed, right? So let's say in a given year, we had an excessing of an elementary teacher, but we had an opening at a secondary level. So this actually happened with one of our teachers. We accessed an elementary position. She happened to have the science certification. We increased our science FTE because she went to that position, and we reduced our elementary. So this becomes a record and a way to reconcile over time the decisions that you make through budget and ensuring that our staffing is aligned with your budget. So that's the reason to have this moving forward. And that was why Peter recommended it. It is a really important reference tool for the board to have, as well as for the district office.
And just for clarification, it's based on actual staffing, not budgeted staffing. Is that correct? Actual or budget, just the
I'm not sure
document.
what you mean by that. In
Well,
other
there
words,
could be a difference, I guess, if there was a position that's not filled, or if there's a vacancy.
it would include the vacancy.
So, okay, so it's based on a budgeted, what's been budgeted.
So the why to follow up is precisely for the reason that you said, is that, we've gone through a cycle now of 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we increased the staff dramatically, and then we decreased the faculty and staff, and now we've built it back up. And so we're at a place where we've stated over the last couple of years that we'd like to essentially be very cautious if we add anyone more. So having a few years back shows us where the growth areas have been in terms of adding staff. And frankly, there's been, in the last year or two, there were a couple points where it was difficult to understand some of the moves that were being made. And so I think a document like this would be helpful.
But a document like this would be helpful going forward.
Going
but
forward.
the first one wouldn't
Well, we
help us
have
for a new budget season.
This becomes the
This would
benchmark
be-
document.
This is one that we would need for, right, this is what we need for the budget.
Well, I guess for the budget for this year.
Right,
you-
but-
Why it's useful next year is because you have a history. So why it's helpful this year is if you have a history.
And that's,
Maybe
I
we
just
get
want you,
one.
that's not the purpose
not the
of,
purpose of this
that's not the
document.
purpose of that document according to Peter. Whatever you decide to do, you decide to do, but he was really clear on why we should have a document like this. So,
You explained it very, very clearly in my opinion. I
Right.
still don't think it's called what you called it. That was the
Wait,
only
wait,
reason I
I'm not
was-
worried about the name
yeah,
of
the
it.
title is,
I'm the thank you for it.
right, we have to say what the purpose of the document was, which was,
Yeah, Randy just
yes,
clarified.
which Randy did a good job explaining.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why you're asking. I just don't think, it sounds like it's a lot of work to do this document, so I'm still not understanding the true need for it to go back. I don't
That's not-
see the need for
I'm
it.
not
Yeah,
requesting-
I mean,
I
this
pulled
is just
it
me.
out
This
because
is,
it's called something that I'm not familiar
right,
with.
We're not talking, we're not, we're done there.
right,
That was-
right. Right.
But I think, so, the reason that I addressed it to Aaron is to say that if this is still an issue next time it comes around, is it something that we should resolve at this point so that when the document comes
let's
forward,
resolve-
But it's two different things, because to fulfill Peter's recommendation is to have a document like this. If you want to talk about something else for some other purpose, that's a different conversation than this particular document to fulfill a recommendation that our HR consultant made. They're two different things.
Cool, so I would say, does Erin agree, because that's gonna come up next time whether she does or not. So if she's fine with your explanation, then we're good.
Does anyone else think that we need to have it?
I would like to have, and we could determine what is the appropriate amount at some other time.
Horrible to have 1 or 2 years.
I just need to articulate how much time, we have one person in this office, so I appreciate it, but I guess I would just ask you to really think hard about what you're asking for and the why, and do we really need it? Because we are not flush with staffing. The hours it would take for Lisa to do this is not nothing. And there's 7 other things we're trying to do, especially right now with the HR audit. We're working on attendance, I can't tell you how long that takes, and it's valuable and it's worth it, but I just need you to know she's one person in that office doing this work. So,
I mean, what I would say, Erin,
Totally respect that, and I was only asking and waiting to hear. It takes 80 hours, like it does to do a rendering, or it takes, like, that's fine feedback. I'm just asking for context. And I guess the other thing, I'm just curious, Peter's recommendation actually mentioned doing it based on budgeted positions, not based on actual positions filled. Just
That's
like,
what-
was there a clarification in the HR?
This is based on budget positions.
I understand that, Peter's recommendation.
same thing.
So saying budgeted means that if you currently have a vacancy because someone's out on leave and you're seeking to fill somebody, we're still counting that position. It's not in the head count because
Okay,
there's a vacant position at the time.
okay.
Question really quickly. So last year, and subsequently the year before that, and subsequently the year before that, we were presented budgets where we were asked for additional positions, right? And the process was great, and we talked about it. I'm not so sure why it would be so hard to conjure that up if every year we ask. So it makes me think when we go into every budget season asking for positions, where does that come from in terms of a list of how many positions you have and need, right? Like you're working from a number, like to create it, you take it.
You
No.
still have to dig through,
You
it's
have
not
to
as simple as that. It's
Yeah.
not as simple as that.
you know, I mean, so the board process is that there is an interest in understanding some aspect. The board member or members raise the question, and then we get feedback about the opportunities and challenges with it. So that's the conversation that we've had. What I would say is, for me, it's not important to resolve that question immediately relative to this document and approving it when we do approve it. But I think, going into the budget season, it would be good to have a conversation about what kinds of information we would want to have. And in the mix of how much things take and what's most valuable in terms of information, that would be something that would be helpful for all of us so that we have a successful budget process. And we may find that in the order of value that document isn't so important relative to other things that.
I mean, maybe it's just, would be helpful, just maybe to work out. You know, most of our decisions about staffing are either driven by demand, right? So we ended up with the 7th kindergarten. You know, it's not as if we do a lot of decision-making around staffing that ultimately, it lands on that FTE chart, right? But your decision to hire a world language teacher last year, you wouldn't even see where that is actually right now, because if she's certified elementary, you don't even realize that that's a world language teacher in that chart. That's why I'm saying, I think we understand what you're asking. I'm just not sure that chart is gonna give you what you want. That's all, right. So, because things get buried in weird ways because of what the purpose of that chart is. So,
Thank you.
Excellent point, yeah, thanks.
I appreciate the clarification.
And I would suggest to take away, when we look into budget season, is there's gonna be some way in which we wanna have a document that reflects, and we can figure out what that is. It's not this one.
right, yeah. That makes sense.
Because I think I do see your point when we were talking about certain positions, you know, leave replacements and,
Yeah.
Whether-
I'm sorry.
And whether we recuse someone because they're moving.
Maria, what did you just say? I'm sorry.
when we were talking about different, I think it was 2 budget cycles ago, when we were talking about staffing, like we had a leave replacement, and then this cohort was moving, and there was like a lot of changes. And I think it was, you know, without discussing names publicly, it makes it very hard to keep it straight. So I think that is an organizational chart that might be beneficial to the board going forward, you know, especially during the budget process when we're talking about movement of personnel.
And what Carol just said, that was important to note. So right now, this is the current numbers. Most teaching positions don't change during the course of the year, but the aides line could very easily change. That number goes up and down throughout the year.
Our number in this moment in time.
That's that moment, yep.
Yep. So it probably would
Okay.
be very helpful when we approve this.
We date it to say it's as of.
No, right, but like to mark the document, not where, when we, like, yeah, like
Yeah, it was as.
adopted of.
Yeah, as of whatever
As
Right.
date.
And that's why Peter suggested that you adopt it each year in
Right.
October. You also want to give there's some settling that happens, especially
That
with
makes
aides.
sense, right,
Mhm.
right. Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So to be clear, we're not approving this tonight until we get a
We'll-
satisfactory.
We'll come back with a new title and.
We're just gonna have a new title, and we're gonna have a date that
Just
identifies.
name it whatever
Modify
you
the
want.
title.
Dump it and let's move on.
Fine.
Is that fine?
Yes.
Okay.
Staffing chart of district employment, or district employment staffing chart, whatever it is.
If I teach an overage, I could be 1.25. Yeah, but
Why
I'm
don't you
teaching.
make me an administrator? Could someone make that suggestion?
What do you want to?
So I personally like the FTE nomenclature, because if you have an overage, you're 1.25, or if you're only a 0.75, so it's not head count, because not everybody's a 1. So I like FTE, because I think that's what it is, it's an FTE chart. But that's how I.
Staffing,
I don't care,
FTE.
so whatever everyone else wants, I really don't care what we call it. It's
a staffing FTE chart?
I'm fine with that.
That sounds good to me.
as of,
I would just say FTE staffing chart.
Yeah, I would say
FTE staffing
And
chart.
we're gonna have to
FTE
spell out,
staffing
and we're
chart.
gonna have to spell out what FTE is.
Full-time equivalents.
Time equivalent.
Do you want to call it table because that's what it is? It's not a-
Staffing table, okay,
well, chart,
FTE
well, chart
staffing
table,
table.
that's,
Is that good? Okay.
Yes.
You have that, Doreen? We'll
Put
figure
F,
it out.
put
Full-time
FTE in
equivalent.
parentheses.
Figure it out
so
tomorrow
now
morning.
circling back to 8.1, we have a motion to approve our now FTE staffing table.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Okay. Still no community here, so we'll skip comments again. Our next meeting is Tuesday, November 19th, 7:30, same bat channel, same bat station. Okay, get a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting for an executive session to talk about the employment history of particular persons.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.